We've all heard the story of Columbus arriving in the Americas. But what about what happened next? In this explainer, we're going to talk about the part of the story that often gets left on the cutting room floor, the immediate, powerful resistance from the Taíno people, who met these invaders not with quiet submission, but with a fierce, absolute refusal to be conquered.
To really get what's going on, you have to see the before and after. Before 1492, Taino society was this incredibly stable communal world, spread across islands like Hispaniola and Boriken. But after the Spanish arrived, that world was completely shattered. What came next was a violent, chaotic collision of two totally different worlds. All right, so let's dive into our first section, a shattered peace. Because the arrival of the Spaniards, well, it wasn't a friendly meeting of cultures. It was an invasion that went from curiosity to outright brutality, really, really fast, and it set the stage for everything that followed. Right from the get-go, Columbus's men were committing just horrific abuses. They were stealing food, assaulting Taino women, taking people captive, and demanding gold that didn't even exist. Now, the Taino leaders, they tried to handle this with diplomacy. They went straight to Columbus with their complaints, but he just blew them off. He completely dismissed their pleas, leaving them with absolutely no peaceful way to solve this. So when Columbus sailed back to Spain, he left 39 of his men behind on Hispaniola at a settlement they called La Navidad. And look, this was not some peaceful little outpost. The men left there took the violence to a whole new level. They roamed the island, raided villages, basically threatened anyone who got in their way. La Navidad became this symbol of Spanish cruelty, and it was the flashpoint for the very first major act of indigenous resistance. Well, this kind of unchecked violence, it just wasn't going to last. Which brings us to Section 2, where we meet the first great leader who decided that enough was enough. This is Cañanobo's fury for first major retaliation. So let me introduce you to Cañabo. He was this incredibly powerful and respected cacique or chief of the Maguana region. He watched what the men at La Navidad were doing, and he absolutely refused to just stand by and watch his world get torn apart. He decided it was time to act. And Cañanabo's response? It was swift and it was decisive. He organized this coordinated, strategic attack that didn't just damage La Navidad, it completely destroyed it. All 39 Spaniards were killed. This was sending a message, loud and clear. The Taíno would defend their homes and their people. But Cañabo was smart. He knew that one victory wasn't going to be enough. So he started building this network of resistance, forging alliances with other really influential leaders, like his brother-in-law Bohechio and the legendary poet chief Anacaona. He wasn't just winning a battle, he was starting a movement. Now for Section 3, testing the gods. The next phase of this resistance wasn't really fought with weapons. It was fought with intellect. This was a massive psychological turning point, and it all started with a single critical question about the Spanish invaders. You see, the Spaniards had this huge myth on their side. They claimed they were divinely protected, basically that they were immortal beings whose God could bring them back from the dead. I mean, think about that. It's a massive psychological advantage that creates fear and makes people hesitate to fight back. But the Taíno weren't just going to take their word for it. They decided to test this claim with this almost scientific approach. They captured a Spanish soldier named Diego Salcedo and, well, they drowned him. But they didn't stop there. To be absolutely sure, they watched his body for 3 full days, just waiting to see if he'd pop back to life. And the result? Exactly 0 resurrections. This was the proof they needed. The myth of Spanish immortality was completely shattered. And this wasn't just a fun fact, it was a total game changer. It gave them this huge boost in confidence and fueled the resolve to fight back on a much, much bigger scale. The Spaniards weren't gods. They were mortal, just like them. And that brings us to Section 4, the Great Rebellion. Because armed with this powerful new knowledge, the resistance just exploded. The revelation that the Spanish could die fueled this massive, coordinated uprising on the island of Boriken, the island we now call Puerto Rico. The leader of this great rebellion was a man named Agüey II, but he was also known as the Bravo. He was charismatic, he was strategic, and he saw the perfect opportunity to unite all the different Taíno chiefdoms of Boriken against their one common enemy. And unite them he did. In 1511, Agüey II pulled together this powerful coalition of major caciques from all over the island. Leaders like Guariones, Urayan, and Orocovics. This wasn't some small skirmish. We are talking about a full-blown island-wide rebellion to drive the Spanish out for good.
So the rebellion really boiled down to a clash of advantages. On one side, you have the Taíno. They knew the terrain like the back of their hand, using guerrilla tactics and ambushes to their advantage. On the other side, you had the Spanish, with the technological terror of steel weapons, horses, and these fearsome war dogs.
In the end, in those big open battles, the Spanish military tech often proved to be just too much, and tragically, Aguibana II himself was killed. But, and this is a really important but, his death did not end the fight, not by a long shot. The spirit of resistance that he ignited would burn long after he was gone. And that brings us to our final section, and a new way to think about resistance, an enduring legacy. Because the fight wasn't just about winning battles anymore, it was about the survival of a people and a culture against all odds. After the major rebellions, resistance didn't stop, it just evolved. Many Taíno fled deep into the mountains, forming these secret communities where they could preserve their traditions far from Spanish control. And you know what? That fight for cultural survival is still going on. It continues right up to this very day with active revival movements, bringing back Taíno language, spirituality, and identity. So the legacy of these first resistance leaders is so much more than a historical footnote. The courage of Cañanabo and Aguibana II laid the foundation for an endurance that has lasted over 500 years. Their spirit is alive and well in the vibrant Taíno identity that we see today. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This story isn't just about a rebellion. It's about an incredible resilience. And it forces us to ask a really deep question. What does it truly mean for a people to survive? What is the real power of a culture that simply refuses to be erased?